So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on Behold the Leviathan, the unusual rise of modern India. This is for Marcellus's first book on economics slash finance, and I think 3 years. So we're all looking forward to the book launch and seeing how the book is received by the market. With us today is Penguin's publisher, Millie Ashwarya. Welcome to the webinar, Millie. And
Thanks,
thank you
Saurabh.
for thank you for publishing the book. So folks, here's the sort of sequence of things that will transpire in the next hour or so. We'll start by Millie talking about the book a little bit as to why she published the book. Then Nandita and I will do a few slides on what's inside the book. We'll try to give you a teaser for the masala and the magic inside the book. And then if you put your questions in the Q&A box of the screen. From the half hour mark onwards, we'll try to take as many questions as we can. Salil Desai, our colleague, will moderate that, right? So let me start things by requesting Millie Ashwarya, the publisher at Penguin, award-winning publisher. I should prefix publisher by saying award-winning publisher at Penguin, and the publisher of most of our books, by explaining why 2 years ago she agreed to publish a book on the economy written by two people from the stock market. Over to you, Millie.
Hi everyone. Good evening. Many congratulations, Nandita and Saurabh. I'm quite excited to be here today for the first event, probably for Beyond the Leviathan. And like Saurabh mentioned, it is a slightly different book than what we have published with him in the past. We have published multiple books with Saurabh. They're all bestsellers. I'm sure most of you have read those, from Coffee Can Investing to the Unusual Billionaires. This book is a broader book. It's a serious book. It's a broader book. It talks about India that we are living, breathing in, and one of the reasons that I definitely was excited was I felt it would bring a different perspective. I think it's a good partnership of a man and a woman, so they're co-authors on the book. So it's a very comprehensive look on how India is changing, what are the factors at play, what are the pushes and pulls, roadblocks, challenges, and opportunities also vis-a-vis China and US. And our authors are going to talk more about all of that in detail. The one thing that we were just talking about, and I was smiling about it, which I found very interesting in the book, is how women are playing a role, and especially women in urban India have more money in the banks than men. So I think that is something very interesting and heartening, and their participation in the economy, in the growth of a country, I think will make an impact in the future as we go along. So many congratulations to both our authors. This is a different, slightly different perspective on India, but a very important book for us. We're all very excited, and I hope that you all will read it and get your copies from Monday onwards. Monday is the publication date for the book. So this is like an early teaser, and for all of you also to get an opportunity to get a sense of the book. So over to you, Nandita and Saurabh.
Thank you so much, Millie. So Penguin's been kind enough to give us some author copies. So those who on this call who would like to get a copy of the book, just drop us a mail and we'll try to get a copy across to you. But as Millie mentioned, from Monday onwards, the book is available. I think Amazon also has prominently said that from Monday onwards, the book will be available. You can place your orders now. So here we go. I'll load up a bunch of slides and we'll get into the crux of today's session. So the reason we wrote this book is that when we came out of COVID, right? I'm thinking back now to the closing months of the second Diwali 2021. So exactly 3 years ago, right? When we came out of COVID and we started traveling again, it felt like we were traveling in a country that was very different from the country that went into COVID, right? It felt like a different India. And I told myself, if it feels like that for people like us who are professional investors, then for other people who are not professional investors, who are doing their day jobs, running their businesses, they must be stunned by the changes in the country. And then I thought about the world outside India, right? Foreign investors, other people, Indophiles living in the rest of the world. I said even they need to know how dramatically the country has changed in the last decade or so. And just to give you a sense of the sort of scale of the changes, right? Some of the factoids which we picked up in the closing months of 2021, the opening months of 2022 stunned us as well. And I think Millie just referenced one of them. So somewhere around 2 years ago, Nandita dug out data from the Reserve Bank of India, which showed that in urban areas, women now have significantly more money in their bank accounts than men. This is the first time this is happening, folks. So around 2 years ago, for the first time in urban areas, women ended up having more money than men in bank accounts. And even more stunningly, Nandita pointed out that women now have more bank accounts in totality than men, right? So if the average balance is more for women and the number of accounts is more for women, you can imagine what that implies, right? So that stunned us. And then, as we were sort of digging further, again, 2 years ago, we realized that South India, or Peninsular India, as we call it, accounts now for a quarter of the population, but half the GDP and two-thirds of the GDP growth, right? So it's a tiny part of the country accounting for only a quarter of the population, basically now is the main economic engine, accounting for two-thirds of India's growth. And then similarly, on that vein, somewhere in the middle of 2022, for the first time, we saw that the board directors of Nifty companies, basically the commanding heights of Indian capitalism, for the first time, we saw that the board directors of Nifty companies were now predominantly neither IIT graduates, nor IIM graduates, nor foreign universities ka graduates. They were just regular Desi Indian graduates who are now running corporate India, right? And as we went through 2022, the idea dawned on us that the whole story dawned on us that if for people like us who have lived here, traveled around the country extensively, we're getting surprise after surprise from the underlying changes in the country. Surely there's something here that we should be telling the rest of the world, and thus Behold the Leviathan was born. We went to Millie in her office in Delhi and pitched the idea to her, and very kindly she accepted to become the publisher of Behold the Leviathan, the unusual rise of modern India. Now, what we have done is we've built the book around three themes, and we've deliberately chosen three themes that other economists do not focus on, right? And the first theme is that any free market democracy grows in a fashion where the country moves forward two steps and then it regresses. It comes back. Vested interests fight back. Vested interests step up and say, boss, this is not working out as per my requirements. I'm going to jam this engine. And that's how India is developing as well, right? And the most famous example, the most celebrated example of vested interest jamming changes is what's called the Plaza Accord. This is basically America getting into a meeting room in a hotel in New York with the other larger economies, specifically with the Japanese economy, and America coercing Japan to revalue its currency by 50% in 12 months and something like 70% in the next 3-4 years, thus rendering the Japanese economy far less competitive and pushing Japan into 30 years of zero economic growth. That's how free markets work. In a free market democracy, vested interests will mess around, and you and I need to understand how that change happens. That's the first theme permeating through this book is how vested interests are interplaying with our free market democracy. The second theme is the power law, right? So it's one of the most famous findings in economics, and some economists call it the theory of tournaments. We call it the power law. What this says is in any free market setting, right? So think of a Wimbledon, think of a tennis tournament like Wimbledon, think of the IPL, right? In any competitive free market setting, the winner will take away way more money. The winner will take away all the spoils, and loads of losers will get chota bits of the spoil, right? The tiny bits of the spoil. So, for example, specifically in Wimbledon, the winner's prize money is 50x that of the first round loser, right? And similarly, I'm sure you guys will know that in the IPL, the top IPL players, the Virat Kohlis, the Rohit Sharmas, the amount of money they get, not just the fees from the team, but also the endorsements they get, will be 200, 300x that of a typical Ranji Trophy a player in our country, right? This is how free market economics works. This is a feature of free market capitalism. This is not a bug. And this is what makes free market so potent, right? And if you and I understand that and its application to the Indian economy, then we'll be able to operate more successfully in modern India. And the third feature is the interweaving of social and economic change, right? No country grows just because the central bank cuts interest rates and GDP grows up. That sort of fantasy stuff only happens in economics textbooks. In most countries, the story of development is social change. Millie just referenced the whole change that's taking place in how Indian women are coming into the economy in far greater numbers. Social change, whether it's caste being a vector of change, whether it's gender, whether it is geography, social and and economic change interplays, what makes studying economics so interesting. And one of the best books I have read on this is Joel Mokir's book, The Gifts of Athena, where this gentleman points out that the Industrial Revolution was as much a story about social change in Europe, especially Great Britain, and how no more than 1,000 people, 1,000 engineers, scientists, industrialists, and their trade bodies and their guilds cooperated with each other and brought about the industrial revolution, right? So these are the three big themes of the book. They permeate the various chapters of the book, and hopefully you'll get much joy out of that. So just to sort of give you a teaser for how we have tried to illustrate this, rather than doing lots of theory, right? We've packed the book with case studies of actual change in the country. And one of my favorite case studies in the book, and one of my favorite cities to visit, is Bangalore, because I think Bangalore is a microcosm. Bangalore is a beautiful microcosm of India at its best, but it also contains some of the downfalls, some of the sort of darker sides of India's development. So, courtesy, in fact, our colleague Naren, who's hosting this call for us, we realized that in the 1970s, much of the region around Bangalore was actually proper farmland, right? It's not sort of semi-urban or something. It was proper farmland. In fact, where Electronic City today is in Bangalore was even till the early 90s proper farmland where cows were grazing, and paddy and ragi and millet was being grown, right? And then in the 80s, Electronic City was born, right? Nandita managed to dig out one of the earliest photographs of Electronic City from the 80s. Electronic City is southeast of Bangalore. But till the early 80s, it was farmland. Then early 80s, these sort of I'm sure many people who live in the outskirts of Delhi or Bombay would have seen these makeshift signs which indicate the beginnings of real estate development. And then a pivotal development took place in 1993. Infosys decided to create its campus in Electronic City, right? That's when the world changed for the farmers in Electronic City. Remember, India liberalized in 91. Infosys IPO'd shortly thereafter. And with the IPO ka paisa, Infosys decided to set up a giant campus in Electronic City. And that's when Electronic City went into hyperdrive. Between 93 and today, so basically in the last 30 years, Electronic City land prices have gone up 250x, right? So that's around 20% compounded, right? The whole area around Bangalore takes off. And you can imagine the farmers, those farmers who were growing crops, right? They made a killing selling their land to Infosys, to Wipro, to Titan, as various Indian companies build giant offices, right? And then if you visit Electronic City today from main Bangalore, you take that long flyover which you can see on the top right of the screen, and it screams through a big part of suburban Bangalore and into Electronic City. 2 years ago, Apple's outsourced contractors started manufacturing the phones there. In fact, my iPhone is a Desi iPhone. It's from the factory in Hosur, which is not very far away from Bangalore itself. And then if you go to Nandita and Naren did a trip to Bangalore, the photographs at the bottom right of the page are the retail area, the shopping center area in Electronic City. So you can see in this little microcosm who's winning. The winners obviously are mega corporations like Infosys, whose stock prices, whose shares are worth tens of billions of dollars. Obviously, their employees are winning as well. Remember, ESOPs are the norm in Bangalore. So I would suspect if you take the market cap of all the big companies in the Bangalore region and assume, just for simplicity's sake, that 10% will be ESOPs, billions of dollars of wealth have been created in the hands of the employees of companies in Bangalore. Those are the clear winners. Who's the loser here? The farmer who had land won because he managed to make some money selling land to Infosys. But the landless farmers, they got less than an ideal deal, right? You could say that they got thrown off the land and they must have got a job in a factory. But as you will discover on reading the book, India has not been very good. India has not been very successful in creating factory jobs. In the whole of South India, there are just merely 6 million factory jobs. So most of those farmers, those landless farmers, had to push further into the Karnataka countryside to earn a livelihood. And the other group of the other constituents whose sort of victory is uncertain, whose life became tougher are small business owners, the kirana store, the auto rickshaw driver, who are operating in a low competitive intensity rural economy, suddenly got thrown into this vibrant, hyper competitive urban, greater urban region around Bangalore, right? And this in a way is this in a nutshell is the microcosm of India. Large, efficient, well-run companies are creating wealth running into hundreds of billions of dollars. Their employees are making wealth running into tens of billions of dollars, and that is those are the rulers of modern India. And then there is a story of people who have benefited, but to a far lesser extent. And then there are people who've lost in absolute terms, right? At every level of aggregation, we tell you this story in the book, and the main thrust of the book is that the master narrative of the country therefore has changed from being a socialist country with all sorts of defeated narratives around fear, around frustration, around failure. We've created a narrative of hope and aspiration, right? My favorite chart in the book is this chart from chapter one of the book. I think Nandita dug this chart out and actually constructed this chart from different layers of data. And what this chart tells you, right? The chart is basically number of deaths and fatalities. You'd say, Saurabh has a morbid fascination. Why is this, the chart on number of deaths? But I think this is a remarkable chart. What this is telling you is the number of Indians dying in terrorist outrages, terrorist episodes, or in the hands of extremists or insurgents, that has come off sharply. So if you look at that red dashed line, around the turn of the century, every year, around the turn of the century, 1,500 Indians would lose their lives to terrorists or insurgents or extremists. That number has come in now below 100. That number's fallen below 100, right? And for a country our scale, and for a country facing the set of problems we faced around, whether it's Kashmir, whether it is the issues around Maoism, whether it's the unfriendly neighbors, this is a proxy. That red line sharply falling is a proxy for that life has become more predictable. It's become safer in India. And once a person feels safe and secure, the mental narrative in that citizen's mind changes, right? So quickly, the narrative in India in the 60s was very much war with China, war with Pakistan, two famines. Can you believe it? Even 50 years ago, we had famines in India. 1970s, MS Swaminathan and the Green Revolution, food scarcity becomes a thing of the past. Fast forward to 1991, I was in class 10. I remember June, July 1991, unforgettable summer. PV Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh open up the economy to the broader world, end the license Raj, right? Even now, if I think about it, even as a 15-year-old, I could see that the world was going to be completely different that point in. And then the narrative changes continue, right? You push forward 17 years forward into free market capitalism, increasingly unfettered, right? Chapter 2 and 3 of the book, we explain how free market capitalism becomes increasingly unfettered. 2008, the IPL, 2016, back to Bangalore for UPI, right? Nandan Nilekani, then National Payments Corporation of UPI. And it just feels incredible that UPI was unveiled only 8 years ago, because today, two-thirds of India's economy gets transacted on UPI. And more recently, 2023, the ISRO's mission to the dark side of the moon. ISRO is headquartered, obviously, in Bangalore. And then we come to the more recent episode around chess. Right now, chess in the book, we've spent a lot of time discussing in the early chapters of the book why chess is almost a metaphor. Chess is a metaphor for how India has changed. So next month, Gukesh from Chennai, next month he will play the World Championship final against Ding Liren from China. Let's hope Gukesh wins. If Gukesh wins, he will become the youngest grandmaster ever to win the World Chess Championship. Now, just quickly on chess, 1988, Vishwanathan Anand became the first Indian grandmaster, right? Remember, it took us as late as 1988 for us to have one grandmaster. Even till 20 years ago, we barely had 10, 15 grandmasters. Even a decade ago, we only had 30 grandmasters. Today, we have 90 grandmasters, the same number as the United States, the same number as China. Out of the world's top 10 players, three are Indian. As I'm sure all of you would have watched recently, 3 weeks ago, we became the first country ever to win the chess Olympiad, both the women and the men's edition simultaneously. and in Pragyananda and Ramesh Babu Vaishali, we have the only siblings ever. They're both brother and sister, are grandmasters. I think India's ascendancy in chess. And remember, there's no government subsidy for chess. There is no free, kerosene or food or electricity for chess players. India's ascendancy in chess is very much a story about the master narrative changing, bright Indians saying we will conquer the world, right? So a big part of the book is how did the master narrative change? What were the social changes underlying India, which brought about a transformation? And we are particularly optimistic that you'll enjoy that. Now, what is the impact of all this on investing? Why are we interested in this? If a society changes for the better, that's where you see corporate life. Corporate life is nothing but a mirror of social changes, right? And again, going back to crunching data, what Nandita did very cleverly a year ago was she took data from the government of India's statistical bank, and she crunched it to show you this chart on the right hand side. What we're showing in this chart on the right is that roughly 17% of India's profitable companies. So we have roughly 60,000 companies in India whose profits are 1 crore or more, right? So roughly 60,000 companies whose profits are 1 crore or more. What Andita has been able to show is that these companies are growing profits at the best part of 15% per annum. But even more remarkably, in the last 4 years, that profit compounding rate is getting closer to 25%. And remember, most of these companies are unlisted. We're talking about 60,000 companies compounding profits at the best part of 25% per annum in the post-COVID era. Most of these companies are unlisted. That gives you a sense of what's going to come towards stock market investors like us. There's a whole world of high quality compounders that's awaiting us, and these companies will, I'm sure, initially be owned by private equity and then get listed. But within this plot, within this narrative, there's an even more fascinating sub narrative that I'll request Nandita to talk about.
Right. Thank you, Saurabh. So, taking forward what Saurabh just said, we tried to see the same trend using a different and controllable data set. Now, the problem with the income tax department data that you saw before is that we don't have any control, or we don't have any knowledge about what kind of companies are making into that list. It's just the data, the number, the VAT number, as well as the years that we have. So by controllable data set, I mean Center for Monitoring Indian Economy collects data on roughly 35 to 40,000 companies in the country, and this includes the financial data. So we then looked at these companies' profits for the last 10 years, and these are the companies as of FY23. We didn't have the data for, unfortunately, FY13. There was no point in time data. So for these 40,000 roughly companies, we deciled them. That is, we cut them into 10 equal parts for each of the 10 years. And according to the level of profits that they have. So the largest profit makers, perhaps the largest 4,000 profit makers will be in decile 1. The next 4,000 will be in decile 2, and so on and so forth until we reach the 40,000 number. So we then looked at 3-year periods where we did not allow these companies to move between deciles. That is, if a company is in decile 2, let's say at the beginning of FY13, it will remain in decile 2 until FY16. So these are the 3-year rules that we did for each of the years. So we understand that there's a very huge survivorship bias here, and we didn't have any other database. But notwithstanding that, what we saw was that it was not decile 1 that was growing the fastest, that one would assume that the largest profit makers are doing really well. It was actually decile 2, which is the next 4,000 companies, that grew at the fastest rate. Other deciles beyond 1, 2, 3, and 4 had negative profits, so we couldn't really plot them here on this chart. But the key point here is that dark blue line that Saurabh is highlighting, which has grown the fastest in the last 10 years. So this brings us to a very interesting point, the table on the right. Saurabh, if you can show that. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so this is the table. So if we look at the bottom left corner first, the one which is small companies and organized companies, the bottom left corner. Yes. So this is where typically most of the decile 2 companies we reckon lie. We like to call them challengers due to mass equalization on access to information and financing in the country, courtesy internet and UPI, which has happened in the last 10 years. These challengers in the post-COVID era especially are making a space for themselves. These companies are run by smart promoters who do their business by leveraging the changes that have come about over the last decade. And around 6,000 companies in this quadrant, or 1 to 1.5% of companies overall, whose PAT is between roughly $6 million to $60 million and account for 22% of India's PAT, have seen their profits compound at around 15% per annum. So these are the challengers. The top left quadrant of the table, which is large companies and organized companies, consists of those which are typically the larger ones that you would see, mostly listed entities. So these are the largest profit generators in the country and encompass most of the listed universes, like I said. These 800 companies, there are roughly 800 to 900 companies in this space, account for nearly 62% of India's profits. So the size of their profits is really large here. And they have also grown at around 15% per annum. And we see that in the next 10 years, these are likely to be challenged by the challengers, because the rise of challengers is faster than the top left quadrant companies, the 900 companies, like we like to call them. And that is evident in the chart on the left hand side. The bottom right corner is where the rest of the companies in this country unfortunately lie. So around these are the this quadrant was hit by heavily by an onslaught of changes that took place in the last 10 years. So obviously there are some players who have come out emerging as winners from the changes that have happened, and then there are some losers. Obviously, a large part of them are in the plebeian section, which is the bottom right corner of this table. First was demonetization, next was GST, and then COVID. All these three shocks hit them one after the other and quite heavily, and because of which their profit growth was basically decimated. Only 44% of these companies were able to grow their PAT at a rate that was higher than inflation. So in real terms, if you would like to call them as economists call it, these companies actually lost money. They did not make any money or barely made any money. So we reckon most of the companies here operated and were earning some profit because of some form of tax evasion, which became practically impossible post GST. So they account for merely 16% of India's profits, but around 99% of India's companies lie in this quadrant. So that's the extent of the problem here.
So folks, I'll give you a quick flavor for the five mega themes and then request Nandita to elaborate upon some of them. We're not going to go through all the mega themes in the interest of time, because otherwise we won't be able to take any questions from you. So this is the Westco theme. Some of you might have come across this before, which is why I'm going to be relatively quick with this. The first is women. Nandita will talk about how urban women are pulling away from men and creating sort of new economic opportunities not seen before. The second is education. First time in India. For the first time in India, we're seeing democratization of boardroom access. Non-IIT, non-IIM, non-foreign degrees are now the ubiquitous sort of occupants of boardrooms. Southern India, peninsular India, the world's fastest growing region. Last decade or so, I think peninsular India has done 8-9% GDP growth, and the next decade also bodes well for peninsular India. China's unraveling. China has picked a fight with America over the last 4 years, and that's creating enormous economic opportunity for India. We've talked about it fairly extensively in the book, explained what layers of opportunity we have. We've also explained where India will not be able to compete with China. Right, and finally, outsourcing. Before COVID, there were only 900 global capability centers in India, mostly focused on IT services. Today, there are 1,700. Every week, two new global capability centers are opening in India, and it's no longer just IT. Payroll, HR, sales, marketing, accounts, anything which is an office work is increasingly migrating from the Western world to not just Gurgaon and Bangalore anymore. It's also second, third tier cities. Nashik, Coimbatore, Indore, Tirunelveli are also beneficiaries, courtesy airports and good road connectivity going into these cities as well. So we'll start by discussing the theme around Indian women. This is chapter 4 of the book, and Nandita, who better than you to talk about this?
Perfect. So, as an economist, most of my work revolves around data and crunching data and driving insights from it. So, around a couple of years ago, when I started researching on this topic, I found a very interesting insight from this very data. So, generally, the popular discourse around women's labor force participation, or LFPR, has been in India that it has been very low and has been falling over the last decade until 2019. This is on an overall basis, but as is often true, the devil lies in the details. So then I looked at the same LFPR data, but this time sliced by age groups. That is basically the LFPR for the age group 15 to 24 years, 25 to 30 years, and so on and so forth. And I found a very interesting insight coming in from there. The age group 15 to 24 actually saw the sharpest decline in LFPR over this period. However, the LFPR for ages 30 and onwards was actually rising. Now, given the demographic situation of the country that we are living in, where majority of our population would lie in the 15 to 30 age group range, where our median ages are around 28, and as more children and girls are going into education, which is also evident in the data for education, where girls are actually surpassing the number of boys in terms of cross enrollment ratio, the LFPR was supposed to fall, and it did. However, as these women emerge out of education and come into the workforce, the labor force participation is bound to rise. And we are actually seeing green shoots of that where the LFPR has already started rising now. So the early trends of this could have been were captured actually. We had a look at this from various data points. So firstly, the data from RBI showed that women in urban and metro areas on an average have more deposit. The average ticket size of the deposits are much larger than what men do. In metropolitan areas, it's as high as 14%. That means women have on an average 14% more money in their bank accounts than men do. According to data from the World Bank, women also have more number of bank accounts than men do. And when we went on our trips to smaller cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities, we were told by bankers and small finance people that it's not actually 14%. Women have almost as much as 2x the money of men than men in their bank accounts. So some people then raised a very valid point and a criticism that this is maybe because most of the bills, utility bills, consumption, everything is done from the man's account in a household. However, we also found that women are also earning more than men do. So women in the tech industry, for example, are earning on an average 7% more than men. So this brings us to a very specific sort of trend that is emerging in terms of where our country is headed, the kind of consumption trends that we'll see, and it has implications obviously on the social front, where women will obviously rise, have more money in their bank accounts, and keep rising, and it will also have implications for investors. Specifically, who are targeting to make money in the long term. There's a specific cohort of people who are going to consume a specific type of product, and those are the things which are going to rise more and more.
Fantastic. So the second theme is the new educated elite. We first spotted this, or I first read about this before I migrated to India. In fact, reading Harish Damodaran's remarkable book, India's New Capitalist. I think he's a remarkable journalist. He's also helped us write this book. I think reading this book was a huge source of inspiration for someone like me who doesn't come from a traditional business class community. But what Harish has written about in 2007, what Harish had written about in this award winning book in 2007 is now playing out all across the country. Kudos to Harish Damodaran for his prescience here. As I said, the data is now showing that you don't need elite education. In fact, elite education in many ways is counterproductive if you want to consider a successful career in business life, because what entrepreneurs have in India today is business acumen. Rather than elite family and elite education, they have the ability to lead multicultural teams, multi-gender teams, and you can understand, right, business aptitude or the ability to lead multicultural teams. There's very little correlation with an expensive or fancy education. And the third aspect that we can see across the country entrepreneurs bring to the table is the ability to use modern technology and harness it to make money. You don't necessarily have to be a technologist. You don't necessarily have to have studied electrical engineering, but you do need to understand how to use modern technology to participate in India's India's growth story, right? And we've given several examples in the book about people, about entrepreneurs from not just non-elite families, but entrepreneurs in very unlikely settings, right? The less privileged parts of the country. It's a sort of clear stamp of democratization of opportunity, right? I'm not going to talk about stocks today. This is not the forum for discussing stocks. Let's focus on the third theme in the book, the explosive ascent of peninsular India. Back to you, Nandita.
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh. So, when we travel, and for our line of work, we have to travel a lot in order to drive our insights. So, from our travels, when we travel to southern Indian states, we can clearly see that peninsular India has pulled, far ahead of the rest of the country by an order of magnitude. The seven peninsular states, that is Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Goa, increasingly demonstrate the traits of a second world country. The data makes that ascendancy even more concrete. We pulled out the data for net state domestic product for all states and looked at the average per capita income for the seven peninsular states versus the rest of India and saw a widening gap between the two, as it is evidenced in the chart. So, around 10 years ago, the gap was around 35%, which is in 2013 to 14. The seven peninsular states had per capita income that was 35% higher on an average than the rest of India. Fast forward to 2022-23, this gap has actually widened to more than 50%. So that's the kind of rift that has been created. And Telangana specifically has emerged as one of the fastest growing states in India in terms of per capita income, where it has already crossed the $3,000 mark, $3,000 per capita income mark. A result of this is the consumption story moving southwards, as this is the demography which can, on an average, afford to consume or spend on items beyond the basics like food, shelter, and clothing. If we dig deeper and ask why is the South pulling away from the rest of India, and as we have highlighted in the book, why is it actually pulling it away? It has bearings in the way caste actually works in the country and also social trust. Specifically, whilst the caste system is prevalent all across India, in south it does not get in the way of doing business, whereas in the north caste and business are deeply interconnected and entrenched. As a result, the peninsular states account for most of the country's GDP growth now. The seven peninsular states, on an average, in the last 10 years, have grown at around 10%, whereas rest of India has grown at around 8%. So that is the rift that we are actually talking about. However, as their population reduces, their representation in parliament is also likely to decline. Population is actually used as a metric to allot seats in the Lok Sabha. The impending delimitation exercise in 2026, which would use the latest census figures, is likely to create this rift because you would have less number of seats for a region of the country which is actually doing much better, and you're punishing them. In a sense, for doing better on all aspects. So already the peninsular states account for only 33%, that is a third of Lok Sabha seats, and this number going further down because of the population factor that I just explained, to let's say around 25% is where we reckon this would go. They are likely to get punished, and this would create a lot of issue in the coming days.
So I think that brings us nicely to the hot potatoes in the book. I'm going to skip the rest of the sort of positive themes in the book and go to what are the five pressing issues that we are highlighting, five hot potatoes that will make life tricky for all of us. We as investors need to be as cognizant of risks as of opportunity. And the first is we call Nandita created this lovely acronym called CAGED. So WESCO is the positive acronym, CAGED is the negative one. The first is costs. We have created an economy where cost structures are very high. And for a poor country, we're one of the poorest 50 nations in the world. We have unusually high cost of land. Our labor is very expensive. So, for example, the cost of labor in Maharashtra is 3x that of Bangladesh. And the cost of capital, specifically working capital costs, are high here. The cost of working capital in India is 2.5x that of China. It's very difficult to build a globally competitive economy if your land, labor, and capital are more expensive than other similar countries at a similar stage of development. The second is AI. We've spent a fair bit of time on AI in the book. We think there's a real potential that AI will be a mass killer of middle class jobs, right? So jobs in the IT sector and financial services, wherever it's a repetitive job that AI can, that technology can learn, AI potentially will do it, not just cheaper than human beings, potentially it'll do it better than human beings. We're already seeing the impact of this on IT services employment in India. The third is jobs at the unskilled level, jobs for the for people with low levels of education. This is a particular challenge for northern and eastern India. We have 500 million people in India's labor force. Roughly 300 million of them are sitting in the north and the east, and employment is a massive issue there. It's I haven't seen any country be able to create 300 million jobs in my entire career, and therefore it's not clear to me how the north and the east of the country actually gets employment. Fourth is the environment, right? In many parts of India, water scarcity is endemic, Bangalore being a case in point. In other parts of India, polluted air creates huge health issues, Delhi being a case in point. And similarly, soil erosion, my home state, West Bengal, we are facing massive issues on coastal soil erosion. Nearly half of the Bengal coast is getting wiped out by soil erosion every year as cyclones strike Bengal, right? And the final issue is delimitation, and that I just highlighted. This is going to be a hot potato in 2026 because the growth is coming from the south, and because of the demographic changes, it's likely that the south's parliamentary representation is going to come down. You can understand that they might not be happy about that. So that's the crux of the book. We'll leave the rest of the slides be because otherwise we won't have time to take questions. We hope you enjoy the book, and Salil, happy to take a few questions from the audience.
Now, Saurabh, and Nandita, Saurabh, I think this is going to be a great book. It's already a great book. So everybody, we'll take some questions now. So let's start with one where actually there's a counterpoint, right? And maybe Nandita can answer this. And uh, on the data related to women having more money in their bank accounts than men, right? The counterpoint from Yash Haryani is that it's because men, transfer or take income or account for income in their wife's or mother's name to avoid tax, and that is all leading to this distortion in data. So how do you contextualize the, what goes behind the scenes in terms of why the money is being transferred?
Right. So I will explain this in a couple of points, but I'll just try to set the context here first. So this kind of transfer of money that happens from the man's account into the woman's account for tax purposes has been going on for quite some time now. I mean, it's not as if people didn't have to pay income taxes, let's say 30 years ago, than they have to pay now. So this is fairly constant. They, showing of less money in their own account versus their wives' accounts who are presumably not working has been going on for quite some time. Then why is it that only in 2022 and 23, that is post-COVID, that we're seeing this uptick in the amount of money in women's bank accounts? So that's the first question to sort of ponder on, and that sets the context very nicely. So it's not merely a consumption-led sort of behavior that we are seeing, where men are just saying कि ठीक है, and that's the point I also made, right? So we are going to pay for the utility bills, so we don't have money in our accounts, or we're just simply going to transfer that money into the woman's account. It's not as simple as that, because we can see that women are earning more, the LFPR is rising, that means they are getting employed. The kind of employment may not be the salaried classes that we talk about, because the LFPR data, if you go into details, and we've talked about this at length in the book, in the chapter 4 of the book, that how women are rising and what's leading to that rise. We've talked at length about this data particularly, but to just put it in a nutshell, what's happening here is that women in their families, even if they are considered as housewives, they've started setting up small shops, selling smaller items from their households. So it doesn't take them to go out of the house really for that employment. They do get money for the goods that they sell. Internet and access to financing has made it super easy for them to get financing and to sell their products and market them. And as a result, that income rise is also reflected in the RBI bank account data. So I hope that answers the question for
So
Mr.
yes,
Yash.
remember, wealth nahi hai. Wealth is stock. Nandita is talking about flow. Income is flow. The income data is very clear. The income data is that women are increasingly earning more than men. Wealth is a stock, right? Wealth gets created over time. So the wealth, we are, unfortunately, nobody in India has data on the stock of wealth by gender. Wealth is unclear. Educational qualifications are clear. There are more women at every level of the education system, school, high school, university, there are more women studying than men. Pass rates for women are far higher than men. It's increasingly evident the best jobs are going to women. And as Nandita said, the RBI data is also showing that bank accounts have more money. Women bank accounts have more money than men. So the flow is clear. The flow is in favor of women. The stock of wealth data is not yet there. But given that our economy is primarily a services economy, 65% of GDP is services. Whatever little manufacturing we have in India tends to be light industrial, knowledge intensive manufacturing, iPhones, pharmaceuticals. There is no role for muscle really in India. India is now increasingly a knowledge oriented economy, and therefore, with no role for muscle and women better educated than men, you can see why by the next 10 years will be increasingly female friendly.
Great. Thanks, Nandita. Thanks, Saurabh. Uh, Next question, we'll take it from Pramir Gandhi. And his question is, all of these changes over the last couple of decades, what what needs to happen to for this to translate into higher per capita income? Because eventually that is what is going to lead to better economic development for India to become a more developed economy.
Just repeat that, Salil. What needs to happen for us to become a more developed economy?
In terms of per capita income, all these changes have been happening. Right? Why is it not translating into rapid or an accelerated growth in per capita income?
Right. So I think part of it is we still have population growth, right? So 1.7% is the net increase in our population each year, and that's a punchy number. So if your GDP growth is 6%, then the per capita GDP will only grow at 6 minus 1.7. And that drag from population growth is punchy. It's even more unfortunate that entire population growth is coming from in the poorest parts of India, right? So in the south, in the south, population stopped growing, what, 20 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, so South population starts, so the most educated, the most prosperous part of India, population stopped growing 20 years ago, and population is growing elsewhere in the country where income levels are quite low. So just to give you a sense, right, when I was in high school in the 80s, India and Sri Lanka had identical per capita income, right? So this is 1986, 87, 88. India and Sri Lanka had identical per capita income. Today, Sri Lanka is twice as rich as India in terms of per capita income. Just imagine, Sri Lanka is twice as rich as India on per capita income. And the reason for that primarily is their population stopped growing 30 years ago, and our population keeps growing at 1.7%. And that creates a drag in our per capita income. Now, typically, Salil, as countries get richer, this population growth comes off. It's already South India stopped growing population, and my reading is in the next 10 years next 10 years or so, our population growth will slow down sharply as Western India and then parts of the north become much more prosperous. So that's the main issue here. I think by and large, GDP growth at 6-7%, given our scale and diversity, is pretty good. This is real in real terms. 6-7% real GDP growth is pretty good. I mean, people keep aspiring for more, but 6-7% GDP growth is pretty good. The challenge is you have to subtract from that the population growth, and therefore, how do we throttle off the population? I think the only answer I can see is prosperity.
Right. Amen to that. So now, the related question. I mean, there are actually a couple of questions which are on the cost of, I mean, the challenges that we mentioned. Right now, the cost of capital in India is high. Right. There's very little that we can do to change that. Uh, Given that, where do you think how do you think the economy will shape in the sense that what kind of businesses are more amenable to be set up in India? What are the kind of sectors that would see higher investments versus what has happened in the past?
So in the closing three chapters, so final three chapters of the book, in the final three chapters of the book, Salil, what we are highlighting is that the only area where we can set up world-class competitive companies is knowledge intensive capital light, right? So the classic exemplars of these are the giant IT services companies and our pharmaceutical companies, right? Pharmaceutical companies are knowledge intensive. Basically, the pill, the drug encapsulates intellectual property, but it doesn't require a heck of a lot of capex to set up a pharma factory. It doesn't require any capex to set up an IT services company. You're just hiring bright people. I think that will be our forte. We have 10 million graduates coming out of college each year. And provided our IT services industry, our pharma industry, our tech industry continues to innovate, I think there's a good chance that this is where India will rise. I've already flagged that it does seem a little worrying that say a year like the last year, in the midst of a global IT slowdown, our IT services industry chose not to hire the the emerging group of graduate engineers. That suggests partly a global slowdown, but I think it also flags the prospects that AI could jam India's job creation engine. And I think it is that much more urgent, I think, both at the policymaker level and at the corporate level, to figure out how do we turn AI into an advantage for the country rather than a tech innovation which wipes out jobs. The epilogue of the book focuses on how AI can become a boon rather than a bane for the country, and we are we are keen, we are optimistic that some of our policymakers will read that epilogue and try to turn AI to India's advantage rather than something which wrecks jobs.
Great. We'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Thanks, Saurabh. There are at least three questions on the risks of India getting into a middle income trap. And I'm not an economist, I don't understand what that is, but would love to understand from you why way that or happen or not happen.
Yeah. It's a bizarre thing. Actually, if we get stuck in middle income trap, that won't be any bad thing because middle income is actually quite far away. At the moment, we are at $2,500. As I said, we are half of Sri Lanka's per capita. We are one third of Thailand's per capita, one fifth of China. So if we get stuck at Sri Lanka's level, Sri Lanka is actually closer to middle income. If we get stuck at Sri Lanka's level of per capita income, that's still a decade or so away. If we get stuck there, वो तब का तब सोचेंगे to some extent. But at the moment, I think we've got far more pressing issues. We're a desperately poor country. We're a vast economy because we are 1.5 billion people, but we're a desperately poor economy. There's opportunity in every industry that we look at. There's opportunity in the country at large. We've got hardworking, bright people trying to make a life. So I find, which is one of the reasons for writing the book, I find much of the conventional discourse in India is influenced by what's written in the West. People take that and parrot that in India. I'm not saying it's nonsense in the West. Western economists are writing sensible stuff, which is appropriate in the Western context. Many of our economists take that and they parrot that and they end up discussing subject matters which are somewhat tangential to what we need in our country. The middle income trap might hit us one day, but that's a issue that is a decade away. It's a issue that if we discuss a decade hence, we'll be happy to discuss it then. Today, the problem is this breaking out of desperate grinding poverty for the vast majority of our people.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, Nandita, Saurabh, we have a series of questions on this whole north-south divide, right? And so you explained on the population front where once population in the north tries to stabilize, and then we can see our per capita income going by itself. Are there any other factors which could contribute to this, or should policymakers intervene to bring about parity or reduce this gap? And there's one question specifically on if you have any suggestions for Eastern India, especially Bengal.
Yeah. So talking about Bengal, first let me sort of talk about it. It's a pet peeve of many of my friends and relatives. Ironically, the type of education that Bengal used to have, I think the education system has deteriorated in the last 20 years. But even today, the education system is pretty decent compared to much of the rest of North India. The education system in South India is superior to what Bengal has, but much of the rest of Northern India and much of Western India, compared to that, Bengal has a pretty decent education system. Literacy levels are pretty high. And therefore, the type of KPO work, right, the type of work that takes place in the global capability centers, transcription of medical records, accounts payable, HR, online sales and marketing. There's actually enough people in West Bengal who could do a lot of that. So West Bengal is actually reasonably well suited to prospering in the knowledge economy. I think if the government in Kolkata and could reach out to the Western to the MNCs who set up these GCCs and perhaps come up with some tax breaks. That might be one way to get the story going. The next remarkable aspect is West Bengal is not landlocked, right? You could argue Bihar and Jharkhand have issues because those are landlocked states. West Bengal is situated on a major port, and marine access historically has been associated with commercial success. That's not worked out for West Bengal post independence because partition killed some of the supply chains. But if the rise of Eastern India is to happen, Kolkata as a port will have to flourish. But let me focus on the. What was your earlier question, Salil? Leaving aside West Bengal.
Other than the population stabilization in north will kind of happen by itself. Other than that, is there something that can be done to narrow this gap?
Yeah, so the government intervention piece, right? I'm not very optimistic. I've never seen something on this scale being successfully tackled by any government. I think Mao tried in China, and it resulted in what's called the Cultural Revolution, which is a euphemism for deaths of millions of people. So let's hope our politicians don't try to solve this epic challenge, which is economic prosperity is down south, and necessarily therefore the jobs are down south, but the people are up north. Already India is seeing enormous migration. There's a guy called Chinmay Tumbe. Chinmay Tumbe teaches at IIM Ahmedabad. He's written a great book on migration within India. We need way more migration from the north to the south. I think free market forces have to prevail, and whatever southern companies and southern governments can do to encourage people to migrate from the north to Tamil Nadu, to Karnataka, to Telangana, to Andhra should be done, because it will make the southern economies more competitive. And then once people move down south, they can send remittances. They can send remittances back to the northern economy. So it's the private sector which will have to be the engine of trying to remediate this. I can't sort of see what the northern states can do to create jobs at this colossal scale that's required here. Salil, we'll have time for one more question, and then the woman power in my family means that my wife will make sure I get dragged out of here.
Of course, right. So on that note, we'll take a question for Nandita now, right? So Nandita, here the you know the increasing participation of women in the economy, that's a very refreshing perspective. Uh, but we are not seeing the same in leadership, right? And I assume the person asking this question is meaning political leadership, corporate leadership, and so on. So any idea of how that can change or when can that change?
Right. I mean, it's a fairly recent thing, right? Women had started going into school, colleges, and getting educated. Now they're coming out into the workforce. So naturally, once a person comes out of education and goes into workforce, they don't directly become leaders, right? They have to start at the very bottom. That's how the corporate hierarchy also works, and that's how any career progression should also happen. So I reckon in due course this will keep happening. Right now what is happening is there are a few women on the top, but there's not enough representation, and that is also partly because of a lot of these biases which perhaps will be existing, because there have never been genuinely so many women at those positions. So it will take some time for that sort of social conditioning to go away. Right now what we're actually seeing is that at the very top level you still have men who are controlling all the shots. At the very bottom level you also see men, because the kind of work that they have to do, physical grunt work basically, cannot be physically done by women. I mean, it's just not possible biologically. Somewhere in the between in the services economy, I think that's where the sweet spot lies. Eventually, these women who are in that sweet spot will rise up to that, the leadership position. It will take some time, and for the bias to also come off, for them also to gain the relevant experience, and for things to change. But yes, of course, as usual, we are hopeful that this will happen. It will happen over a course of time, but of course, if this has happened, if women are earning more money now today than men do, what makes us stop to
I
think
think, and
that
then Salil, that's in a
will not
way
happen?
encapsulates the book. In a conservative patriarchal country,
Hmm.
urban women now have more money in the bank than men and more bank accounts than men. I think that is the unusual rise of modern India. It's remarkable that in spite of everything, what's working out is pretty impressive.
Well,
Yeah,
cheers to
and the
that.
sky's the
And
limit.
of course it is. Right. So I think we are at the end of our scheduled time. So thank you very much, Saurabh and Nandita.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for this
folks.
great
Thank you
book.
so
Many
much.
congratulations. So people,
And
Thank
it's
you so much,
releasing, like
Sunil.
Lily said, on Monday. So please go and buy it at a bookstore near you.
and thank you, Millie. Thank you for being the publisher. Thank you so much.
No, not at
Bye,
all.
folks.
It's an
Thank,
honor and pleasure,
thank
and congratulations again. And waiting for Monday.
Thank you, folks. Have a great weekend.
Have
Bye
a
for
thank
great
you
now.
so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
day.
Bye bye.